I arrived early at my doctor's appointment and heard my son's voice inside. "Diagnose her with dementia. I'll pay you whatever you want. I need control of her accounts." My hands shook as I hit record on my phone. The next day, they arrived to help me sign some papers. But when I played the recording, my son's face went white. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. The murmur of voices from the next room was a familiar background noise in Dr. Finch's office. I sat on the examination table, the crisp paper sheet crinkling under my palms. My annual checkup was routine, a minor punctuation in a quiet week. I listened to the hum of the building's air system and studied a diagram of the human heart on the wall. Then a particular tone cut through the wall. It was low, urgent. I knew that voice. It was my son, Marcus. He was not supposed to be here. My appointment was at 2. He knew that. He had asked just yesterday what time I would be at the doctor's. A simple question from a concerned son. I felt a first faint ripple of unease. I shifted on the table, the paper complaining loudly beneath me. I held my breath. The wall was thin. Their words were not fully distinct, but the cadence was clear. Marcus's voice strained with a pleading I had never heard him use with me. Dr. Finch's drier, professional tones, responding in short bursts. I caught fragments. "Assure you, Marcus, procedure is straightforward." A pause. Then Marcus again, clearer. "The house is the main asset. The accounts are all in her name. We need the declaration of incompetence first." The words did not make sense, not at first. They hung in the sterile air like a foreign language. Incompetence. My name. My house. Then Dr. Finch spoke, his voice dropping. I had to lean forward, my body rigid. "The evaluation? I can write it. The cognitive tests can be interpreted. Given her age, some memory lapses are expected. We can document them as a pattern." "And the fee?" Marcus asked. The question was blunt, transactional. 10,000. Half now, half when the court approves the guardianship. Discreetly, of course. A sound escaped me, a short, sharp intake of air that felt like a puncture. I clasped my hand over my mouth. My fingers were cold. The room seemed to tilt, the diagram on the wall blurring. My son, my only child. In the room next door, buying a diagnosis from the man who had treated my hypertension for 15 years. They were constructing a legal cage with bars made of paperwork and lies. They were discussing the dismantling of my mind, my life, my freedom, as if planning a real estate transaction. A terrible heat flooded my chest, followed by an icy wave that left my hands shaking. I looked down at them. These hands that had held him as a baby, that had cooked his meals, signed his report cards, written checks for his tuition. Now they trembled against the white paper. I closed my eyes. A lifetime of composure, of quiet endurance rose to the surface. I had weathered other storms. This one, however, was a betrayal that felt geologic, a cracking of the very ground beneath me. I opened my eyes. My gaze fell on my handbag resting on the chair beside the table. Inside it was my phone, a modern smartphone Marcus had insisted I learn to use. "For safety, Mom," he had said. The irony was a physical taste, metallic and sour. The voices continued discussing timelines, which judge might be more favorable. They were so confident, so absorbed in their conspiracy. They had not considered the thinness of the wall. They had not considered me. Action was required. Clear, precise action. The shock began to recede, burned away by a cold, focusing clarity. I moved slowly, deliberately. I slid off the table, my feet soundless on the tile floor. I retrieved my phone from my bag. My hands had stopped shaking. I opened the recording application, a feature Beverly had shown me for remembering shopping lists. I tapped the red circle. A timer began its silent count. I held the phone up, screen dark, and took a step closer to the wall. I stood there, a statue in a pale blue gown, holding a tiny digital witness toward the source of my ruin. I listened, now with a detached, analytical ear. Marcus listed my assets: the house, fully paid for, the retirement account, the savings from my library pension. He mentioned my stubborn independence as a problem to be solved. Dr. Finch assured him the medical report would be unequivocal. "We'll cite the confusion she exhibited today," he said. I had exhibited no confusion. I had greeted him clearly, answered his preliminary questions about my sleep and diet. The lie was already being constructed, the foundation laid. The recording captured it all: the price, the plan, the cold assessment of my life as a collection of transferable goods. After several minutes, I heard the scrape of chairs. The meeting was concluding. I stopped the recording. I moved quickly, silently. I returned to the examination table, placing the phone back in my bag just as the door to my room opened. Dr. Finch entered, his expression a familiar mask of benign concern. "Sorry for the wait, Eleanor, a small emergency." He did not meet my eyes. "That's quite all right," I said. My voice sounded normal, perhaps a degree softer than usual. "Everything is fine?" "Oh yes, fine," he said, waving a hand. He picked up my chart. "Now let's see. Any dizziness? Forgetfulness?" I looked at him. This man I had trusted. I saw the slight tightness around his mouth, the way his eyes scanned the chart too quickly. I thought of the $10,000. "No more than usual, Robert," I said, using his first name deliberately. "At our age, a misplaced set of keys is just part of the landscape, isn't it?" He chuckled, a dry, hollow sound. "Indeed it is. Well, let's get your blood pressure. You seem a bit flushed." He wrapped the cuff around my arm. I sat perfectly still, my mind no longer in the room. It was already miles away in Beverly's sunny kitchen. The cuff tightened. He read the gauge, frowning. "Elevated," he noted. "Stressful week?" "You have no idea," I murmured. The rest of the exam proceeded mechanically. I answered questions, followed instructions. My body was present, cooperative. My mind was a locked room, and inside it, a single piece of evidence glowed with a cold, hard light. When he told me he'd need to see me again in a week for some additional cognitive assessments, I simply nodded. "Of course," I said. "Whatever you think is best." I dressed slowly after he left, each button a deliberate act. I placed my phone carefully in the inner pocket of my purse. I walked out of the office, past the receptionist who bid me a cheerful goodbye. I stepped into the afternoon sunlight. The world looked the same cars in the parking lot, the same sky, but everything was different. The axis of my life had shifted. I got into my car, placed my bag on the passenger seat, and started the engine. I did not drive home. I drove straight to Beverly's house. I did not cry. I did not rage. I planned. The recording in my phone was no longer just a file. It was the first move in a game they did not yet know we were playing. I pulled into Beverly's driveway, the familiar sight of her yellow bungalow, usually a comfort. Today it felt like a command post. I turned off the engine and sat for a moment, my hand still on the keys. The weight of the phone in my purse was immense. I took a slow breath, the kind I used to take before stepping into a busy library. Then I got out and walked to her front door. She opened it before I could knock. Her face, framed by its short, stylish white curls, shifted from a welcoming smile to immediate concern. Beverly could read me like a large print book. "Ellie? What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," I said, my voice steady. "I've heard a conspiracy." I stepped inside, the familiar scent of lemon polish and something always baking in her oven wrapping around me. She closed the door, her eyes never leaving mine. "Sit. Tell me." She guided me to her kitchen table, its cheery checked cloth a stark contrast to the news I carried. I placed my purse on the table but did not open it yet. "It's Marcus," I began. Saying his name aloud in this context made my throat tight. "And Robert Finch." Beverly's eyebrows shot up. "Your doctor? What on earth?" I explained in clear, sequential sentences. The early arrival, the overheard conversation through the wall, the specific terms they used. I described the bribe amount, the discussion of my assets, the planned false evaluation. I relayed it all as if reading a report, keeping my own feelings locked away in a separate compartment. Beverly listened, her expression hardening from worry into something fierce and focused. Her decades as a paralegal kicked in. She was now processing facts, not just a friend's pain. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Evidence. You need proof." "I have it," I said. I opened my purse and retrieved my phone. I held it up. I recorded the last several minutes of their discussion. It's all here. A slow, grim smile touched Beverly's lips. It held no joy, only a deep, satisfied recognition of a tactical advantage. "Eleanor Vance, you brilliant woman, let's hear it." I found the recording and placed the phone on the table between us. I pressed play. Our voices, mine and Beverly's, fell away, replaced by the muffled but unmistakable sounds from Dr. Finch's office. Marcus's pleading tone, the doctor's clinical betrayal. The words, incompetence, guardianship, 10,000 hung in the warm kitchen air like poison. I watched Beverly's face as she listened. Her jaw tightened. She picked up her teacup but did not drink from it. Her grip was white-knuckled. When it ended, the silence returned, heavier now. Beverly placed her cup down with a precise click. "Okay," she said, the single word full of resolve. "Okay, they have moved from the realm of family drama to the realm of crime. Conspiracy, fraud, attempted elder abuse. This is a legal and ethical offense." She spoke with the clipped efficiency I remembered from her working days. "Your first move is not emotional. It is legal. You must secure your position before they even know you're aware." "How?" I asked. I needed her direction. My clarity had brought me here, but her experience would chart the course. "You need a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. You need a shark in a suit who specializes in estate law and elder rights. I know someone, Atira Jones. She's younger than us, fierce, and has no patience for this kind of predation. We call her first thing tomorrow. And until then, we plan. They think you're unsuspecting. That is our weapon. You will act normally. You will go home. If Marcus calls, you will be your usual self. You will confirm the follow-up appointment with Finch. You will give them no reason to suspect." She leaned forward. "But privately, we prepare. We gather your important documents, deed, bank statements, investment portfolios, your existing will, everything. We bring it all to Atira, and you will grant her power of attorney temporarily, so no one can touch your assets without her say-so. You will revise your will immediately." The word revise meant disinherit. The finality of it was a cold blade. I nodded. "Yes. This recording," she said, pointing to the phone. "We make copies. We save them in the cloud, on a flash drive, everywhere. It is our shield. The moment they produce their forged medical evaluation, we produce this, but we may not wait that long." A glint appeared in her eye. "The best defense is a good offense. We let them make their move, and then we dismantle it publicly." "You mean, let them come to me with the papers?" "Exactly. Let Marcus bring Dr. Finch to your living room. Let them lay out their plan with their false concern. Let them think they have won. And then you play this." She tapped the phone. "You look your son in the eye and you let him hear his own greed. That is not just legal strategy, Ellie. That is justice." The plan was taking shape, transforming my shock and hurt into a series of actionable steps. The emotional wave threatened to break again, thinking of facing Marcus in such a way. But Beverly's steady, angry presence fortified me. This was no longer about a mother's heartbreak. It was about a citizen's defense. "What if the recording isn't admissible?" I asked, a practical worry surfacing. "We'll ask Atira. But even if it has issues in court, its power is in exposure to the medical board, to his partners, to the community. Robert Finch will never write another prescription if this gets out. And Marcus... She paused, her expression softening for the first time. Marcus will have to face what he's done. Really face it. That may be the only thing left you can give him. We spent the next 2 hours in detailed planning. Beverly made notes on a legal pad. We listed the documents I needed to locate. She drafted a script for my phone call to Marcus, should he contact me. Casual, unaware, slightly tired from the doctor's visit. We discussed the timeline. They would likely move quickly, perhaps within the week. Finally, the practical energy ebbed. I sat back in my chair, the exhaustion of the afternoon settling into my bones. Beverly saw it. She got up and put the kettle on again. "Now," she said, her voice gentler. "Now you can feel it if you need to." I shook my head. The tears were there, a pressure behind my eyes, but they felt dangerous. If I started, I might not be able to stop, and I could not afford that luxury yet. "Later," I said, my voice rough. "There will be time for that later, after it's done." She brought over 2 fresh cups of tea, this time with a spoonful of honey in each. We drank in silence, 2 old women at a kitchen table, surrounded by the ghosts of 50 years of friendship and the cold modern reality of a digital recording. My home, my sanctuary, now felt like a stage being set for a confrontation, but I was no longer a prop in their play. I had written myself back into the script as the director. The next move was mine to allow and theirs to make. I finished my tea, the sweet warmth a small, steadying comfort. "I should go home," I said. "I have documents to find." Beverly walked me to the door. She put a firm hand on my arm. "You are not alone in this, Ellie. Not for 1 second." I nodded, believing her. I drove home, the evening sky deepening to twilight. The house was dark and quiet when I entered. I did not turn on many lights. I went directly to my small home office, a converted bedroom lined with bookshelves. I opened the fireproof lockbox where I kept my passport and social security card. Beneath them lay the folder labeled "Important." I pulled it out. Inside was the deed to my house, the will I had written a decade ago, leaving everything to Marcus, and the summaries of my financial accounts. I spread them on the desk. I looked at them not as the story of my life's work, but as the battlefield. Tomorrow I would take them to a lawyer. Tonight I simply sat with them, and with the profound, quiet fury of a betrayed mother, I began to prepare. The following morning I dressed with particular care. I chose a navy blue suit I hadn't worn in years, a simple strand of pearls and low-heeled pumps. The outfit was armor. I placed the folder of documents and a separate flash drive containing the recording into my leather portfolio. Beverly picked me up precisely at 9. She gave me an approving nod. "You look ready for battle." Atira Jones's office was in a modern building downtown, all glass and steel. The reception area was quiet, decorated in muted grays and blues. A young assistant led us to a conference room. Atira entered moments later. She was indeed younger than us, perhaps in her late 40s, with sharp eyes behind stylish glasses and an air of immediate competence. She shook our hands with a firm grip. "Mrs. Vance, Mrs. Carter, please sit. Beverly has given me a brief overview. Let's begin." We sat at the polished table. I opened my portfolio and slid the folder toward her. "These are my current documents. Deed, financial summaries, my existing will." She opened the folder, scanning each page with quick efficiency. "And the recording?" I handed her the flash drive. She plugged it into her laptop. We sat in silence as the damning conversation played once more. Atira listened without expression, her fingers steepled under her chin. When it finished, she leaned back. "That is a compelling piece of evidence. The offer of a bribe for a fabricated medical diagnosis is a clear criminal conspiracy. The admission of intent to file a false petition for guardianship is fraud. Is it admissible? I asked, voicing my primary concern. In a criminal or civil proceeding? Possibly. The laws on single-party consent for recording vary, but in this state, as long as one party to the conversation consents, it's legal. You were a party to the overall appointment, and their discussion pertained directly to you. I believe it would be admissible. However, she said, her gaze steady, its power extends beyond a courtroom. A state medical board would be very interested. So would his professional partners. The threat of its release is often more potent than its actual use in litigation. Beverly spoke up. Our thought was to let them make the first move. Let Marcus and Finch come to Ellie with their papers, then confront them with the recording. Atira nodded slowly. A strategic ambush. It denies them any opportunity to fabricate a cover story. They will be caught in the act, with their own voices providing the confession. It's a smart play. But first, we must make you legally untouchable. She turned back to the documents. We need to revoke any existing powers of attorney, which I assume are granted to your son. I never granted him formal power of attorney, I said. He is the executor and sole beneficiary of my will. That is all. Good. That simplifies matters. Today we will execute a new durable power of attorney for finances and healthcare, naming a trusted person, not your son. She looked between Beverly and me. I want it to be Beverly, as primary, and you, Atira, as successor, I said. Beverly and I had discussed this the night before. Agreed. We will also prepare and execute a new last will and testament. I assume you wish to disinherit Marcus Vance? The clinical term hung in the air. Yes, I said. The word was final. We will also create a revocable living trust today, Atira continued. We will transfer the title of your home and your primary investment accounts into the trust. You will be the trustee, maintaining full control. But legally, the assets will be held in the name of the trust, not in your individual name. This creates a significant hurdle for anyone seeking a quick guardianship over your estate. They would have to challenge the trust itself, a much longer and more difficult process. It effectively walls your garden before they even arrive at the gate. The relief was a physical sensation, a loosening of a vice around my chest. This was not just fighting back. This was building a fortress. Let's do it, I said. The next 2 hours were a blur of precise language and deliberate actions. Atira dictated terms to her associate, who prepared the documents. We reviewed page after page. The new will was stark. It left a modest sum to a local library fund, with the remainder, including the house, to Beverly, with instructions to establish a charitable trust for senior legal aid, which we would formalize later. Marcus's name appeared only once. I specifically make no provision for my son, Marcus Aaron Vance, for reasons known to him and to me. Signing that line required a pause. I thought of the boy he had been, the man I thought he'd become. I exhaled and signed my name with a firm, clear hand. The power of attorney documents were next, then the trust agreement. Atira explained each step. By funding the trust today, you are placing these assets beyond the immediate reach of a potential court-appointed guardian. They would have to prove you were incompetent at the moment of the transfer. Given that you are here, with counsel, understanding every detail, that would be a difficult argument for them to make, especially with this recording as evidence of their motive. Finally, it was done. A stack of executed documents sat on the table. Atira provided me with copies. Keep these secure. The originals will be in our vault. You are now in a position of considerable strength, Mrs. Vance. The trap is indeed baited. When do you expect their move? Marcus called this morning, I said. He was checking in on me. He mentioned wanting to come by later this week to help me with some paperwork. He was overly cheerful. I told him that would be fine, that I was feeling a bit tired after the doctor's visit. He jumped on that, saying he and Dr. Finch could come together to explain everything. I agreed. Atira allowed herself a small, cold smile. Perfect. They are walking into a scenario of their own design, but the script has been rewritten. My advice for that meeting, say little. Let them present their case. When the moment is right, play the recording. Do not negotiate. Do not justify. Simply state the new facts. Your assets are secured, your will is changed, and their conduct will be reported to the appropriate authorities. Then ask them to leave. If they refuse or become belligerent, call the police. I will be on standby. I gathered my copies, placing them back into my portfolio. It felt heavier now, weighted with legal authority. Beverly touched my arm. "You've done it, Ellie. You've taken back the keys." Walking out of the cool, quiet office into the bright midday sun felt like emerging from a bunker. The world was still turning. People were going about their business, but I was fundamentally changed. I was no longer a potential victim. I was a plaintiff, a trustee, a woman who had just meticulously deconstructed a plot against her. The sadness was there, a deep, cold pool, but it was separate from my purpose. The next move was theirs. My job was to wait, to perform my part of the oblivious mother, and to be ready. As Beverly drove me home, I looked at my hands, the same hands that had signed away my son's inheritance. They were steady. The next 2 days were an exercise in disciplined waiting. I performed the routines of my life. I watered the plants. I went to the grocery store. I called Beverly each evening to report nothing, which was exactly what we wanted. I left the legal documents from Atira Jones in their folder on my desk, a quiet monument to my prepared defense. My phone, with the recording saved in multiple places, stayed within reach. Marcus called on Thursday morning to confirm. "Mom, just checking you're still up for our visit this afternoon. Doctor, Finch and I want to go over some things. Make sure you're fully informed." His voice was cloying, the tone one uses on a child. "Of course, dear," I said, allowing a slight weariness into my words. "What time should I expect you?" "Around 3. We won't take long. Just some paperwork to make things easier for you." The euphemism was nauseating. "All right, I'll put the kettle on." At 2:30, I prepared the stage. I placed a simple tea service on the coffee table in my living room. 3 cups, the plain ceramic set I always used. I put a plate of store-bought shortbread cookies beside it. The normalcy of the ritual was important. I did not wear my suit armor. I chose a soft, worn cardigan and comfortable slacks. I sat in my usual armchair, a book open on my lap, though I did not read a word. The doorbell rang at 3:15. The delay felt strategic, a power play. I took a slow breath, smoothed the cardigan, and walked to the door. Marcus stood on the porch, a leather folder under his arm, wearing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Beside him, Dr. Finch looked pale and uncomfortable in his sport coat, his gaze fixed on a point over my shoulder. "Mom," Marcus said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. His cologne was too strong. "You look tired." "Just a quiet day," I said, stepping back to let them in. "Robert, hello. This is a surprise." "Eleanor," he said with a tight nod, finally meeting my eyes for a fleeting second. "Just here to provide some clarity on your medical follow-up." I led them to the living room. I made tea. "Please sit." They sat side by side on the sofa, a united front. Marcus placed his leather folder on the coffee table. I took my armchair, the low table between us like a neutral zone. I poured the tea, my hands steady. "So," I said, passing them their cups, "what is this paperwork that's so important?" Marcus exchanged a glance with Dr. Finch, who gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "Well, Mom," Marcus began, leaning forward with an expression of grave concern, "Dr. Finch and I have been talking. We're both worried about you. These little episodes of confusion, the forgetfulness you mentioned at your appointment, we think it's time to put some safeguards in place for your own protection." I blinked, allowing my face to show polite confusion. "Safeguards? What do you mean?" Dr. Finch cleared his throat. "Eleanor, the cognitive screening I did raised some flags. It's not uncommon at your age, but it suggests a declining capacity to manage complex affairs. Bills, property, legal decisions. To prevent mistakes or exploitation, the best course is a voluntary guardianship. Marcus would be appointed to manage your financial and healthcare decisions. It's a relief, really. Lets you enjoy your life without the stress. I looked from one to the other, letting a faint frown appear. But I manage just fine. I pay my bills online, I do my taxes. You think you do, Mom? Marcus said, his voice softening into a patronizing lilt. But you've made errors. You've forgotten things. Dr. Finch has the medical opinion to support this. We're not taking anything from you. We're helping you. It's just a formality. He opened the leather folder. Inside were several official-looking documents with bold headings. I could see the words, Petition for Guardianship and Declaration of Medical Necessity. He slid a single-page document toward me along with a pen. This is a simple statement of voluntary agreement. It makes the court process much smoother and less stressful for you. If you could just sign here, at the bottom. He pointed to a blank line. I looked at the paper. The legal jargon was dense, but the intent was clear. I picked up the pen, feeling its weight. I held it loosely. I don't understand all this, I said, letting my voice waver slightly. What happens after I sign? Then I can take care of everything, Marcus said, a hint of impatience bleeding through his crafted concern. The house, the accounts. You won't have to lift a finger. We can even look at a nice assisted living community where you'll have more social opportunities. The mention of moving me from my home was a bridge too far. I felt a cold spike of anger, but I kept it buried. I looked at Dr. Finch. Robert, you've been my doctor for 15 years. You truly believe I can't manage? He shifted on the sofa, unable to hold my gaze. The tests were quite clear, Eleanor. It's for the best. You need to trust us. I placed the pen down carefully on the table, next to the unsigned paper. I leaned back in my chair, the posture of a weary old woman. I let the silence stretch for a moment, watching them. Marcus's smile was growing strained. Dr. Finch studied the pattern on the rug. Trust, I said, the word quiet in the room. That is the core of it, isn't it? I reached into the pocket of my cardigan and took out my phone. I placed it on the coffee table beside the unsigned guardianship petition. Marcus's eyes flicked to it, then back to my face, a trace of confusion appearing. Mom, this is serious. We don't have time for games. No, I agreed, my voice changing. The waiver was gone. It was calm, clear, and as steady as it had been in Atira Jones's office. We don't, which is why I want you both to listen very carefully before we proceed any further. I tapped the screen of my phone, navigating to the audio file. I think you need a second medical opinion, or perhaps a first-hand account of your diagnosis. I found the file. I looked directly at my son, and for the first time that afternoon, I saw a flicker of genuine fear in his eyes. He knew. He didn't know what, but he knew something had shifted irrevocably. What is that? Dr. Finch asked, his voice tight. It's a recording, I said, from my last appointment. There was a very informative conversation happening in the office next door. I found it educational. I met Marcus's panicked stare. You should hear it. It clarifies everything. My thumb hovered over the play button. The cozy living room, the scent of tea, the plate of untouched cookies, all of it was now just set dressing for the reckoning that was finally here. They were frozen, waiting for the sound of their own condemnation. I pressed play. The sound of their own voices filled the quiet living room. It was tinny through the phone speaker, yet every word was distinct. Marcus's pleading, calculating tone. Dr. Finch's cold professional agreement. The mention of $10,000. The discussion of my assets as obstacles to be removed. The phrase declaration of incompetence. I watched their faces. Marcus's initial confusion hardened into stunned disbelief, then drained into a sickly, ashen horror. His eyes widened, fixed on the phone as if it were a venomous snake. Doctor. Finch's reaction was different. He seemed to shrink into the sofa cushions. He looked down at his hands, clenched in his lap, his shoulders slumping as if under a physical weight. A faint sheen of sweat appeared on his forehead. He did not look at me or at Marcus. The recording played to its end. The final words, "We'll cite the confusion she exhibited today," hung in the air, followed by the digital silence of the stopped file. The ordinary sounds of the house, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the wall clock, rushed back in, grotesquely loud. Marcus was the first to move. He lunged forward, not at me, but toward the phone on the table. My hand was there first. I closed my fingers around it and drew it back, placing it in my lap. "No," I said, a simple statement of fact. "Mom," he gasped, the words strangled. That's not what it sounds like. You don't understand the context. We were just discussing options for your care." "You were discussing a bribe," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of the warmth he would have expected, even in anger. "You were conspiring with my physician to fabricate a medical condition. You were planning to have me declared incompetent so you could seize control of my home and my money. The context is perfectly clear." Dr. Finch finally spoke, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Eleanor, I can explain." "Explain what, Robert?" I turned my gaze to him. "Explain the $10,000 fee for a false diagnosis. Explain which cognitive tests you plan to interpret. Your explanation is on the recording. I have heard it." Marcus ran a hand over his face. He was trying to regroup, to find a foothold. "You recorded a private conversation. That's illegal." "It is not," I said. "And even if it were, it would be the least of the illegal activities in this room. You came here today to commit fraud. You presented a falsified medical opinion to coerce me into signing away my rights." I gestured to the document on the table. "That paper is evidence. Your voices on that recording are evidence. My lawyer has copies of everything." The word lawyer struck him like a physical blow. "Lawyer? What lawyer? Why would you involve a lawyer?" "Because when people plot to steal from you, you seek legal counsel, Marcus. I met with Atira Jones 2 days ago. My assets have been placed into a trust. I have executed a new durable power of attorney, naming Beverly Carter. I have written a new will. You are not in it." He stared at me, his mouth slightly open. The reality of his situation was dawning, and with it, a desperate panic. "You can't do that. I'm your son, your only family." "You ceased to act like my son the moment you decided my mind and my life were commodities you could purchase," I said. The statement felt clinical, like reading a verdict. "You are a conspirator, and you," I said, looking back to Dr. Finch, "are a disgrace to your profession." Finch finally lifted his head. His eyes were red-rimmed. "What are you going to do?" "That is no longer your concern. You will leave my house now. You will take your fraudulent papers with you." I stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate, asserting my authority in my own space. "Do not contact me again, either of you. Any further communication will go through my attorney, Atira Jones." Marcus rose to his feet, his body trembling with a mixture of fear and fury. "Mom, please, listen to me. I was desperate. My business, it's failing. I'm in debt. I didn't know what else to do." "There are always other choices," I said. "You could have asked me for help. You could have been honest. You chose betrayal. That was your decision. Now you live with the consequences." "You're destroying me," he shouted, the veneer of the concerned son utterly gone, replaced by the raw face of a cornered man. "No," I corrected him, my tone still frighteningly even. "You attempted to destroy me. You failed. The destruction you are now facing is of your own making. Now leave." He stood there, breathing heavily, looking from me to the door, as if calculating whether there was any argument left. Seeing none, he snatched the guardianship papers from the table, crumpling them in his fist. He shot a furious, betrayed look at Dr. Finch, as if this were all the doctor's fault, and then stormed past me to the front door. He yanked it open and left without a backward glance, slamming it behind him. Dr. Finch stood up slowly, an old man suddenly. He could not meet my eyes. "I'm sorry, Eleanor," he mumbled, the apology meaningless. "Get out," I said. He nodded, a broken gesture, and shuffled to the door. He opened it quietly and stepped out into the afternoon. I stood alone in my living room. The tea was cold. The cookies were untouched. The echo of their voices seemed to linger in the air. I walked to the window and watched Dr. Finch get into his car and drive away. I felt no triumph. I felt a vast, hollow quiet. The confrontation was over. The trap had sprung. The power had shifted. But the room where it happened felt contaminated. I picked up the teacups, carried them to the kitchen, and poured the cold liquid down the drain. I washed each cup carefully, placing them back in their cupboard. I wiped the coffee table. I performed these small, ordinary tasks to reclaim the space, to scrub away the psychic residue of their betrayal. When the room was restored to order, I sat back down in my armchair. I picked up my phone and sent a pre-arranged text to Beverly and Atira Jones. 2 words. "It's done." The response from Beverly was almost immediate. "On my way." The response from Atira came a minute later. "Well done. Hold position. Next steps tomorrow." I placed the phone aside. I waited. The silence was no longer threatening. It was mine again. The battle for my home was over. The war for what came next was about to begin. I did not move from the armchair. The quiet of the house was different now. Not peaceful, but emptied, like the silence after a storm has passed, but before the damage is assessed. I listened to the clock tick. I counted 27 ticks before I heard the sound of a car door slamming outside, not the smooth closure of a visitor, but the angry, metallic crash of frustration. Footsteps pounded up the walk. The doorknob rattled, then the door flew open. Marcus stood there, framed in the doorway. His earlier fury collapsed into a raw, frantic panic. He had not driven away. He had been sitting in his car, and the reality had fully descended upon him. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking. He stepped inside but didn't close the door. "Please, you have to listen." "I have listened," I said, still seated. "I listened through a wall. I listened to your bribe. I listened to your lies today. I am done listening." He took a few staggering steps into the room, his hands held out in a pleading gesture I had not seen since he was a boy, begging for a later curfew. "I'm sorry. I am so sorry. It was a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake. I was desperate." "You said that." My voice was calm, a flat surface against which his emotion broke. "You don't understand." The words were a cry. "I'm ruined. The business. The investors pulled out. I took out second mortgages, personal loans. I'm facing bankruptcy. I thought this was the only way to fix it, to save everything. You thought stealing from your mother was the solution to your financial problems. It was not a question." "I wasn't stealing," he insisted, the lie automatic, then he faltered. "I was. I would have taken care of you. A nice place. You wouldn't have wanted for anything." "I do not want for anything now," I said, "except, it seems, an honest son." He flinched as if struck. He sank onto the edge of the sofa, the same spot he had occupied minutes before. But now his posture was one of utter defeat. He put his head in his hands. "What are you going to do? With the recording?" "That is no longer your concern. The decisions are mine and my lawyers." "Will you go to the police?" The question was muffled by his hands. "That depends on your actions from this moment forward. If you leave now, and you do not contact me or attempt to interfere with my affairs again, then perhaps the legal consequences will be limited to Dr. Finch. He is the medical professional. His crime is clearer." This was a calculated statement. Atira and I had discussed the possibility of using Marcus's fear to ensure his compliance. He looked up, a flicker of wretched hope in his eyes. "So you won't?" I did not say that. I said it depends. Your fate is now tied to your silence and your distance. If you respect those boundaries, you may avoid criminal charges. You will not, however, avoid the other consequences. You are no longer my heir. You are no longer welcome in this home. You have forfeited those privileges. He stared at me, truly seeing the finality for the first time. The mother who had always been a soft place to fall was gone, replaced by this immovable figure in an armchair. His face crumpled. "I've lost everything." "You attempted to take everything from me," I reminded him. "You have lost only what you tried to steal. There is a difference." A car pulled up outside, Beverly's sedan. I saw the relief in Marcus's eyes warp into a new shame. He did not want a witness to his disintegration. He stood up quickly, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "I'll go." "Wait," I said. He paused, a prisoner awaiting a pardon. I stood and walked to the hall table. I opened a small drawer and took out an old photo album. Not the fancy one, but a simple worn binder. I pulled a single photograph from its sleeve. It was a picture of him, aged about 10, grinning with a missing front tooth, holding a science fair ribbon. I walked back and held it out to him. "Take this." He looked at the photo, then at me, utterly confused. "It is the last thing you will ever take from this house," I said. "Now go." The cruelty of the gesture was precise and deliberate. It was not the kindness he mistook it for. It was a severance, a symbolic return of the boy he had been, because the man he had become was banished. He took the photograph, his fingers trembling. He looked at the image of his innocent, proud face, and a sob escaped him. He turned and almost ran out the door, passing Beverly on the walkway without a word. Beverly came in, closing the door softly behind her. She took one look at me and opened her arms. I walked into them, and for the first time since I'd heard his voice through the wall, I allowed my body to shudder. I did not cry, but I trembled, a violent, silent quaking that felt like my skeleton trying to escape my skin. She held me tightly, saying nothing. When the trembling subsided, I stepped back. "Atira is on her way," I said, my voice rough. "Good," Beverly said. "You did what you had to do. You were magnificent." "I was necessary," I corrected. I felt hollowed out, scraped clean of all emotion except a deep, weary cold. Atira arrived 10 minutes later. She carried a briefcase and an air of brisk purpose. We sat at the kitchen table. "Report," she said. I recounted the meeting, the playing of the recording, their reactions, Marcus's departure, and his desperate return. I relayed our final exchange and my conditional statement regarding police involvement. Atira listened, making a few notes. "You handled it correctly," she said. "The conditional offer. Keep him in line with the threat of legal action while focusing the immediate fire on Finch. It's strategically sound. His return and his emotional breakdown are also useful. They demonstrate his consciousness of guilt. Now, we move to the official reckoning. Are you prepared to file the complaint with the state medical board?" "Yes," I said. There was no hesitation. "Tomorrow I will draft the formal letter and attach a copy of the recording. We will also send a copy to the senior partners at his practice. Once that is done, the process is out of our hands, but the outcome is virtually certain. He will lose his license." I nodded. The actions felt sequential, mechanical. "And Marcus?" "Monitor his compliance. If he respects the boundaries, you may choose not to pursue further action. The disinheritance and the estrangement are significant personal consequences. The choice to involve the police remains yours, but I advise that securing your position and neutralizing Finch are the priorities." Beverly made more tea. We sat at the table, the three of us, a council of war in my quiet kitchen. The strategies were set. The emotional wave had crested and broken. Now there was only the cleanup, the administrative work of ruin. I looked at the chair where Marcus had sat and begged. I felt nothing. The space where a mother's love had been was now occupied by the quiet, implacable machinery of justice. It was a fair exchange. The next morning, I woke to the clear light of a day that held no appointments, no pretended confusion, only purpose. Atira's drafted letter arrived via email just after 9. It was a model of legal precision. It stated the facts without embellishment: the date, the time, the parties involved, the nature of the recorded conversation. It referenced the attached audio file and offered to provide a sworn affidavit. The language was dry and powerful, letting their own words constitute the indictment. I reviewed it, changed nothing, and replied with my approval. Beverly arrived at 10 to accompany me to the post office. For moral support, she said, but I knew it was also for witness. We printed the letter on Atira's firm letterhead and the duplicate copy for Finch's medical group. I signed both with my formal signature, Eleanor J. Vance. We placed each letter in a large manila envelope with a copy of the recording on a separate flash drive. I addressed one to the State Medical Board's disciplinary division. The other I addressed to the senior partners at the address of Finch's practice. The physical act of writing the addresses felt significant, a concrete step into the formal machinery of accountability. The post office was quiet. I purchased 2 certificates of mailing for proof of delivery. The clerk took the envelopes without comment, weighing them, applying the postage. I watched as she placed them in the outgoing bin. They disappeared behind a metal door with a soft clang. That was it. No fanfare, no dramatic music. Just the bureaucratic conclusion to a betrayal. "It's done," Beverly said beside me. "The process is begun," I corrected. "It will be weeks, perhaps months, before there's an outcome. But the wheels are turning, and they're his wheels now." We drove back to my house. The anticlimax was its own kind of weight. The furious energy of the confrontation and the strategic planning had dissipated, leaving a flat, quiet landscape. I made lunch. We ate at the kitchen table. The conversation was ordinary, about her garden, a new bakery that had opened, the book I was reading. We did not speak of Marcus or Finch. It was a deliberate return to the mundane, a reclaiming of simple peace. 3 days later, Atira called. "A development," she said, her voice holding a note of professional satisfaction. "I received a call from the managing partner at Finch's practice." They received the letter. They have placed Finch on immediate administrative leave pending an internal investigation. They were profoundly apologetic. They asked if there was any way to mitigate the damage to the practice's reputation. What did you tell them? I told them our sole concern was ensuring Dr. Finch never has the opportunity to abuse a patient's trust again. Their internal actions are theirs to manage. The board complaint, however, will proceed independently. They understand that. "Good," I said. There was no pleasure in it, only a confirmation that cause and effect were functioning. "There's more," Atira continued. "They asked if you would be willing to meet with them to discuss your experience. I suspect they want to gauge the risk of a civil lawsuit. I advised them you are not currently pursuing civil remedies, but that you would consider a meeting if you felt it could prevent this from happening to another patient. The decision is yours." I thought about it. The idea of sitting in that modern office building again, facing a panel of men in suits, was unappealing. But the idea of speaking plainly to them, of making them see the human cost of their colleagues' corruption, held a certain value. "I'll do it," I said, "but only with you present. Of course, I'll arrange it." The meeting was set for the following Tuesday. In the interim, life assumed its new, quieter rhythm. I found a new primary care physician, a woman recommended by a friend at my book club. My first appointment was straightforward. She asked thorough questions, reviewed my history, and treated me like an adult. I did not mention the previous week's events. It was a fresh start. The day of the meeting with the medical partners arrived. I wore the same navy suit I had worn to Atira's office. Armor, once more. Beverly drove us downtown. The building was the same, but the suite was different. Larger, more opulent, the domain of the senior doctors who owned the practice. We were shown into a conference room. 3 men and 1 woman sat at the table, all in professional attire, their expressions a careful blend of concern and formality. Introductions were made. Atira sat to my right, a silent guardian. The managing partner, a Dr. Evans, began. Mrs. Vance, first, on behalf of the entire partnership, I want to express our deepest apologies for the appalling breach of trust you experienced. Dr. Finch's actions are a violation of every ethical principle we stand for. I nodded, accepting the statement without comment. We have initiated our own investigation, the woman, Dr. Lowell, said. The recording you provided is unequivocal. We understand you have filed a formal complaint with the State Board. We will fully cooperate with that investigation. What we hope to understand, Dr. Evans continued, is if there is anything we can do, beyond our internal disciplinary actions, to address the harm caused. We are reviewing our protocols for patient evaluations, particularly for older adults, to prevent any possibility of coercion. I looked at each of them in turn. They were nervous. They were worried about lawsuits, about their reputation. That was understandable. But I had not come for reparations. I had come for a specific, clear purpose. I am not here to negotiate a settlement, I said, my voice clear in the quiet room. My assets are secure. My health is fine. The harm you speak of is not financial or medical. It is the destruction of trust. You cannot give that back. What you can do is ensure Robert Finch never practices medicine again. You have the power to support the board's investigation, to provide any internal evidence of past misconduct, and to terminate his association with this practice permanently. That is the only meaningful action. There was a silence. They had expected tears, perhaps, or demands. They had not expected this calm, surgical precision. You have our word, Dr. Evans said, sincerity breaking through his professional facade. We will see this through to the end. His career here is over. Good, I said. I stood up. Atira stood with me. Then our business is concluded. Thank you for your time. The meeting lasted less than 20 minutes. As we walked back to the car, Atira said, "That was masterful. You gave them nothing but a clear instruction. They will follow it. They're too scared not to." I felt no triumph, only a slow, steady sense of closure. One part of the equation was solved. The official wheels were turning, and they would crush Robert Finch's professional life. It was a direct, proportionate consequence. As we drove away, I looked at the building in the rearview mirror. I felt nothing at all for the man inside it who was now facing the ruin he had tried to bring upon me. The account, in his regard, was settled. A week passed. The formal silence from Marcus was a relief. I received no calls, no letters. I went about my days. I worked in the garden, pulling weeds with a methodical focus. I finished the library book and returned it. I had dinner with Beverly. The sharp edges of the crisis were softening into a new, permanent shape for my life. The medical board process would take time, but the outcome for Finch was inevitable. My own affairs were orderly. I existed in a state of watchful peace. It was a Thursday evening, twilight beginning to deepen the shadows under the trees. I was on the porch, in the old wicker chair, watching the fireflies appear. The neighborhood was quiet. I heard the slow approach of a car, not the familiar purr of a neighbor's vehicle, but an older engine with a faint knock. It stopped in front of my house. I did not move. The car door opened and closed. Footsteps came up the walk, slower, heavier than before. Marcus appeared at the bottom of the porch steps. He looked different. He was unshaven, wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, clothes I remembered from weekend chores years ago. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow. He carried no leather folder, no air of conspiracy or false concern. He looked like a man who had not slept. He stopped at the foot of the steps, not presuming to come up. "Mom," he said. His voice was raw. I did not invite him up. I simply waited. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he said. The words seemed rehearsed, but the pain in them was authentic. I need to say some things, if you'll listen." I considered him. The desperate, furious man from my living room was gone. In his place stood someone who appeared stripped bare. I gave a single small nod. He took a shaky breath, looking down at his worn sneakers. "I lost everything. The business was failing for 2 years. I kept throwing good money after bad, trying to save it. I remortgaged my house. I took loans from people I shouldn't have. I was drowning. I was so ashamed. I couldn't tell you. I couldn't admit to my mother that I was a failure." He looked up, his eyes meeting mine in the dim light. "That's not an excuse. It's just the context. I wasn't thinking about you. I was only thinking about the hole I was in. Your house, your money, they weren't yours to me in that moment. They were a lifeline, a way to make the pressure stop. I dehumanized you. I turned my own mother into a financial instrument. I don't know how I did that. I don't recognize the man who had that conversation with Finch." He paused, swallowing hard. "When you played that recording, it was like hearing a stranger, a vile, greedy stranger, and I realized that stranger was me. I have to live with that. I have to be that person now." The confession was quiet, devoid of theatrical pleading. It was a simple, awful statement of fact. "I am filing for bankruptcy," he continued. "The house will go. My car is already sold. I've taken a job. It's a warehouse job, loading trucks. It's hard work. It's honest work. I come home exhausted and I can't sleep because I see your face when you handed me that photograph." He wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand, a rough, angry motion. "I am so sorry, Mom, for betraying you, for planning to steal your freedom, for not seeing you as a person. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just needed you to know that I know what I did. I am fully aware of the monstrous thing I tried to do." The silence after he spoke was filled only with the evening sounds of crickets. I studied him. This was not the same man who had begged and made excuses in my living room. That man was still trying to win. This man had already lost and was stating the tally. "Thank you for telling me," I said. My voice was calm. The words were not forgiveness. They were an acknowledgement of receipt. "Will you—" he started, then stopped himself. "No, I said I wouldn't ask." He looked at the porch boards between us, a chasm he had dug himself. "I start therapy next week. A court-mandated financial counselor suggested it, for the bankruptcy, but I'm doing it for me, to try to understand how I got here." "That is a good step," I said. It was a neutral, clinical observation. He nodded as if I had given him a valuable instruction. "I won't bother you again. I needed you to hear that from the person I am now, not the monster I was then, even if they're the same body." He took a step back. "Goodbye, Mom." He turned and walked back down the path, his shoulders slumped not in defeat, but in the weary bearing of a heavy truth. He got into the old car, started it, and drove away slowly, the taillights disappearing around the corner. I sat on the porch as full darkness fell. The fireflies danced their silent, intermittent patterns. I felt a profound and complicated sadness. It was not the sharp grief of the initial betrayal. It was the deep, weary sorrow of witnessing a total shipwreck. He had finally seen the carnage, and in seeing it, had become a stranger to me in a new way, not as an enemy, but as a broken man who used to be my son. There was no victory in this. There was only a tragic, completed picture. He had offered no excuses, only context and responsibility. He had asked for nothing. In doing so, he had given me the only thing left that he could, the truth. It changed nothing about the past. It altered no legal document, but it settled something in the atmosphere. The furious, unresolved energy of his crime was gone, replaced by the bleak finality of consequence. I went inside, eventually. I locked the front door. I prepared for bed with my usual routine. As I lay in the dark, I thought not of the bribe or the recording, but of the exhausted man on my porch, stating his own damnation. My anger had nowhere to go. It had been answered not with defiance, but with surrender. The chapter on Marcus, the active threat, was closed. What remained was the long echo, and the life I would build in the quiet it left behind. The morning after Marcus's visit, I woke with a clarified resolve. The emotional turbulence had settled. The battle was over, and the landscape of my life had been permanently altered. It was time to build something new on that ground. I called Beverly and Atira and scheduled a meeting at my house. They arrived together. Over coffee in my kitchen, I laid out my idea. "I have been thinking about the money," I said, "the assets that were the cause of all this. I no longer wish for them to simply sit as a monument to a defended fortress. I want them to serve a purpose. I want to establish a charitable trust." Atira set her cup down. "What kind of trust?" "A small one, to provide legal aid and advocacy for other seniors, specifically for those who may be facing similar situations: undue influence, financial exploitation, coercive guardianship petitions. They might not have a Beverly or an Atira. They might not think to record a conversation. I want to help fund the legal guidance that can protect them." Beverly's eyes lit up. "Ellie, that's perfect. We can structure it as a donor-advised fund through a community foundation for simplicity," Atira said, already thinking practically. "You can name it. You can define its purpose. You can appoint advisors. Beverly, certainly. You can fund it with a percentage of the assets from the trust we created." "I want to call it the Eleanor Vance Trust for Senior Legal Advocacy," I said. The use of my own name was not vanity. It was a reclamation. It stated that I, Eleanor Vance, was not a victim to be erased, but a founder, a source of aid. Atira nodded, making a note. "We can draft the founding documents. It will be a beautiful legacy." The following week was spent in purposeful activity. Atira's associate prepared the trust agreement. Beverly and I researched local nonprofits that provided elder law clinics. We drafted a simple mission statement. The work was focused and positive, a direct counterpoint to the Yinmo that had started this. Concurrently, I had my first full appointment with my new physician, Dr. Amina Cole. Her office was warm and efficient. She reviewed my entire history herself, asking thoughtful questions. When we reached the part about my previous doctor, I decided on a limited disclosure. "I recently ended my patient relationship with Dr. Robert Finch," I said. "I lost confidence in his ethical judgment. It was not related to clinical care, but to a breach of trust. I prefer not to discuss details, but I felt you should know there is no ongoing medical issue prompting the change." Dr. Cole listened, her expression serious and respectful. "Thank you for telling me. I will note the change in provider. Your records have been transferred and they appear complete. Is there anything from that experience that makes you hesitant about any part of our process today?" "No," I said. "Your transparency is appreciated." The exam proceeded without incident. It was professional, thorough, and collaborative. As I left, I felt a layer of contamination from Finch's office finally slough away. My health was back in the hands of a professional I could trust because I had chosen her. The day arrived to sign the trust documents. Atira brought them to my home. We sat at the dining room table, the same table where Marcus and Finch had hoped to secure my capitulation. The symbolism was not lost on me. Beverly was there as the designated first advisor. The document was dense, but its intent was clear on the first page: the Eleanor Vance Trust for Senior Legal Advocacy. Its purpose was to provide grants to qualified organizations offering free or low-cost legal services to persons over 60 facing financial exploitation or abusive guardianship proceedings. I read it through carefully. I initialed each page. On the final signature line, I signed my name with the same deliberate hand I had used to disinherit my son. This signature, however, was an act of creation, not dissolution. It felt solid, good. "There," Atira said, gathering the executed copies. "It's established. The foundation will handle the administration. You and Beverly will review grant requests quarterly. The first funds will be transferred next week." After she left, Beverly and I remained at the table. "You've done an extraordinary thing, Ellie," she said. "You took poison and turned it into an antidote for other people." "It seemed the only logical thing to do," I said. "The money was a target. Now it's a tool. That feels correct." In the days that followed, a quiet sense of order solidified. The legal threats were neutralized. The perpetrator was facing professional ruin. The son was accounted for, broken but accepting his consequences. My home was secure. My health was managed. And now, a portion of my wealth had been converted into a force for protection. I began to sleep through the night again. The tight coil of alertness in my chest, which had been wound since the moment in the examination room, began to relax. I was not happy. That would require a forgetting I did not possess. But I was at peace. I was active. I was in control. I started volunteering at the local library again, helping with their community bulletin board. I updated the section on local resources, making sure the information for legal aid clinics, including the types of services my new trust would eventually support, was prominently displayed. It was a small, concrete task. It felt like closing a circle. My life was not the same as it was before the betrayal. It could never be. The fracture with Marcus was permanent. The naivete about those closest to me was gone. But in its place was a firmer foundation, built on my own proven strength, the loyalty of true friends, and a purpose that extended beyond my own front door. The vengeance was complete, but it had transformed, as I had transformed, from an act of destruction into an architecture of resilience. The new chapter, my chapter, was now officially begun. The late summer sun was warm on the porch, the kind of heat that soaks into bones and loosens old tensions. I had just finished watering the hanging baskets of petunias. Beverly arrived, carrying a pitcher of fresh lemonade, the ice cubes clinking softly. We settled into the wicker chairs, the familiar creak of the cushions a comfortable sound. "So," Beverly said, pouring the lemonade into tall glasses, "I heard from Helen Gardner. You remember her? She's on the Community Foundation Board." "I remember," I said, accepting the cold glass. Condensation immediately beaded on its surface. "She mentioned, entirely off the record, that the medical board has reached a decision on Robert Finch. The hearing was last week." I took a sip of the tart, sweet drink, and his license has been revoked, permanently. There was also a substantial fine for ethical misconduct. The board's report cited the recorded evidence as conclusive and damning. His partnership dissolved. He's finished. I nodded slowly. The news was expected, yet hearing it confirmed felt like the final click of a lock. "A proportional consequence," I said. "Exactly," Beverly replied. She didn't smile, but her eyes held a deep satisfaction. "He'll never be able to do that to anyone else. The system worked because you made it work." We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the buzz of a lawnmower a few houses down, the ordinary sound of a Saturday. "And Marcus?" I asked. I had not asked in weeks. Beverly's expression softened. She knew I wasn't asking for details out of latent concern, but for completion. I asked around discreetly. "The bankruptcy proceedings are moving forward. He sold what was left. The warehouse job is ongoing. A friend of a friend works there and says he's quiet, shows up on time, does the work. No complaints. He's attending the therapy, as he said he would." I absorbed the information. It painted the picture he had presented on my porch. A man stripped back to fundamentals, bearing his consequences without theatrics. It was the most I could have hoped for, and less than I had once dreamed of for him. "It's a life," I said finally. "An honest one now. That's something." "It is," Beverly agreed. The mail truck rounded the corner and stopped at my box. I went to collect it. Among the bills and catalogs was a formal envelope from the Community Foundation. I brought it back to the porch and opened it with my thumb. It was the first quarterly grant request for the Eleanor Vance Trust. A legal aid clinic in the next county was seeking funds to support a part-time paralegal, specifically for elder financial abuse cases. The request was detailed, the budget modest and clear. A note from the foundation director was attached, asking for my advisory recommendation. I showed it to Beverly. We read it together there on the porch, the paper warm from the sun. "This is it," Beverly said, her voice quiet with pride. "This is the first one. Your legacy in action." I felt a surge of something clean and sharp, a feeling utterly distinct from the cold triumph of the confrontation or the bleak sadness of the fallout. This was purpose. This was meaning extracted from the poison. "We should recommend full funding," I said. "Absolutely," Beverly said. We filled out the brief recommendation form together, signing our names side by side. I placed it in the reply envelope to mail back on Monday. The action was simple, administrative. Its weight was profound. Later, as the sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the lawn, we simply sat. The lemonade was gone. The excitement of the news had passed, leaving a deep, settled calm. "Are you all right, Ellie?" Beverly asked, not looking at me, her gaze on the fireflies beginning their evening dance. I considered the question. I thought of the empty space where a son's love had been, now filled with the quiet hum of vigilance and the steady work of the trust. I thought of the doctor, who was no longer a doctor. I thought of the recording, now filed away as evidence in a closed case, and the legal documents in my desk that guaranteed my autonomy. "I am at peace," I said, and it was the truth. The vengeance was complete, but it had not left me bitter. It had left me clear-eyed and resolved. I had protected what was mine. I had punished the guilty. I had channeled the wreckage into something that could help others. The scales, in their own imperfect way, felt balanced. "Good," Beverly said, reaching over to pat my hand. "That's everything." We sat until the stars began to appear, pinpricks in the deep blue twilight. The porch light remained off. We didn't need it. The story that had begun with a whispered betrayal in a sterile room had ended here, on this porch, in the comfortable silence between two old friends. The battle was over. The peace was mine. I had reclaimed not just my home and my money, but my narrative, and in doing so, I had built a new ending. It was enough. It was more than enough.